Hello, everyone. My name is Jake Johnstone, and welcome to the Grit with Wisdom podcast. This is the podcast that aims to delve deep into the inner psyche and the mindsets of mountain bikers from all aspects of our sport in order to help you understand some of the tools, the tactics, and what it takes to push the boundaries of our sport from a mental and emotional perspective. Today's guest is Nicole Kennedy. Originally from Colorado, Nicole is a gnarly rider who now calls Squamish here in BC home. Nicole has a downhill and enduro racing background, and as a member of the recently formed Into the Gnar progression team with Johan Borelli, Nicole is no stranger to danger when it comes to pushing her limits on the bike. Recent videos depict her dissecting some of the largest and most technical gaps and drops in the Sea to Sky region, and she shows no sign of slowing down anytime soon. So listen in as we dig deep into the why and the how behind her processes, training, and the mindset that allows for such inspiring riding and growth. We talk about everything from mindset relating to crashing, how she's overcome some big crashes on the bike. We talk about the mindset behind, picking out which features she rides and how she actually breaks down that process and, goes from concept to reality. So I found this conversation super interesting, and I'm sure you will as well. I'm sure we can all learn something from this to take away and implement in our own riding. So with no further ado, let's give a warm welcome to today's guest, Nicole Kennedy. Hey Nicole, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. You're just telling me you've had a bit of a busy day working on vans. So I'm super stoked to get down here and talk about bikes for a little bit. I'd love to start, right from the beginning, and I'd love to kind of dive deep straight away and ask you why. Why do you ride mountain bikes?
Um, why does everybody ride mountain? They're fun. Yeah, it gets me outside. I was riding bikes like with my family as kids, nothing like extreme or really intense mountain biking, but just even like the connection with people that you can get and like quality time even. But yeah, it's something to get you outside and take care of yourself, and something to enjoy and have fun. And um it's amazing the places the bikes take you as well, so it's like a good way to travel and see things from a different perspective. And yeah, it's just fun and I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many reasons, isn't there? But you just nailed
Yeah.
a few of them there. That's fantastic. And how old were you when you actually started mountain biking?
um Actually, I feel like, well, with kids in the valley these days, it's like they're starting when they learn how to walk. But um, I actually, right out of high school, I moved to the bike park up from where we lived, and so I started. I could only afford a hardtail, so it was Keystone Bike Park. If anybody's been there, super rough kind of and rocky.
Wow.
um, and I was on a hardtail with like rim brakes. And then I finally finally saved up for a full suspension. And yeah, so I was out of high school, so I was like 18, 19 years old, I think, when I was really getting into it.
Wow, that's awesome. And do you think kind of that start on, a bike that was less than ideal for the terrain, do you think that made you a better rider today?
Maybe. And I kind of even got in the mindset of like hardtail for life and, and everything. And then
Nice.
I was constantly bringing it in because it just got rattled to pieces, and the guys at the bike shop just kind of like felt bad for me, so they let me take a downhill bike for the day. And then my mind was just completely blown. I was like, oh my god, I could last longer than 3 laps, this is amazing. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I need to save up and get one of these. So yeah, it was a life-changing experience, I guess.
That's awesome. No turning back,
Yeah.
eh? And for those that haven't been down to that bike park, you're talking about Colorado, yeah?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And how would you describe the general terrain down there for those that haven't seen the photos we posted online or haven't been there themselves?
Well, Colorado's actually quite a bit like the interior of BC, like when I was in Big White and Kamloops and um, that like yeah, the interior is very, very much like Colorado. It can be dry and rocky and just kind of more high alpine riding. And then you go out towards, I mean, it does change quite a bit throughout the whole state, which is amazing. But if you go more towards the desert and you go towards Utah into Virgin and Green River and Moab, you have more of that beautiful sandstone, which is like quite grippy, similar to the granite and like in the sea to sky. Then you have like the sand and the red dirt and like these crazy cliffs and everything. And if people haven't been down there to experience the desert, I highly recommend it. It's like a whole other planet. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's unreal. And it's cool hearing the similarities there between the rock down there and then the rock in Squamish, where you're currently based. I
Yeah,
was kind of thinking, wow, you know, you're in the complete opposite kind of terrain now,
yeah,
living here in BC, but it's cool to hear there's still some common ground there.
yeah. I mean, it's like obviously different, but still just as like surprisingly grippy. You know, when you
Hmm,
come up, like I remember first moving here, and we're looking at granite slabs, and I was like, yeah, right. And then and then realizing the amount of control and just getting used to it was yeah, it was similar to the kind of like the sandstone. And there's some granite in Colorado as well, different parts. So yeah.
absolutely, that's super cool. And how did you go adjusting when you first moved here to Squamish? How did you go adjusting to the different terrain, maybe the routes, the steep loamy trails, the paved trails, stuff like this?
Yeah, it was again mind blowing to say the least. It was pretty sweet coming up here and I didn't even know what a loamer was.
I
um,
can relate.
and I guess like back home, like a black trail would be like a blue trail here. So kind of having a quick learning curve on that, like, oh, it's just a blue, and then realizing I was like, oh my gosh, and then slowly working my way up. So we lived at North Shore at the time, and so getting my Frome and Seymour laps in. Um, and I remember we followed one of our buddies on like this newly built Lomer Trail, and I'm like, yeah, sweet. Like I don't know what that means, but let's do it. And it was so steep. I'm sure if I went and found that trail again, I'd be like, oh, this is nothing. But I just remember riding down it and not being quite comfortable or knowing how to surf through the loam, like just brakes locked, like I'm not slowing down, like I don't I don't know how to do this. And then it'd be so steep, and then you come up to like the steep granite slab in the middle of it, and it's super intimidating because it's just like a giant rock face, and not knowing how to ride that either. And then you try to get off your bike, and it's probably more dangerous to walk your bike than it would be to just ride down the thing. I made it down the bottom in one piece surprisingly, and I was just like, okay, um, this is different. um, and then just trying to, I went on some of like the local rides, and when Sorka did like the ladies Thursday nights, and trying to get to know people and then getting to know the trails through them, and you're like, oh, where should I start? And so just diving into that stuff, it was like, is this what everything's like? I don't really know. um, but yeah, it was unreal, and I still find it unreal. Like I know it's easy just to kind of get caught up in what you're doing, but stopping and taking a breath, being like, wow, this place is still so cool to me, and I love it.
Absolutely, we're super lucky to be based here, hey? And that's so cool hearing that story about kind of moving to the North Shore, the terrain being, so much steeper, so much gnarlier than what you're used to. And kind of just the ways you went about maybe, putting down some routes, finding some other people to ride with, and getting introduced to some other trails rather than just, walking away and being like, wow, that's way
Yeah.
too hard.
Yeah.
So cool to hear. And I know you've done a bit of racing in the past as well. I'd love, can you tell us a little bit about your racing background? And then I'm curious to know, are you racing this season?
Yeah. So I actually started racing when I worked at Snowmass Bike Park, a different bike park in Colorado. And there's like local night races like they do in Whistler on Wednesdays and stuff. Um, and I never raced before. My uncle Troy actually used to race downhill bikes, and so I was interested in that. And some buddies were doing it, so I felt more comfortable since I worked on the trails. So I just started doing the local races, and then it went really well for me. Actually wound up winning all of them, uh, which I was like, oh wow, like maybe I should look into this then, because I was just doing it casually, and so then when we moved up here, I didn't know what enduro was either. I was just doing downhill races, um, and so I signed up for the hot on your heels enduro, the all women's enduro, where you dress up in funny outfits, and me and my friend Brittany were Wayne and Garth. But before that, actually, I did the Squamish enduro, but wasn't planning on it.
Nice.
My partner got injured, so I took his spot, and never ridden 50K in my life. And I was like, I just want to make it to the end.
Wow,
And
so
I
that was the
wound up,
full course, eh?
yeah, I just did the full course, and I made ninth. And so I was like, okay, like that's
That's
not
super
terrible.
impressive. Yeah.
um, so maybe I should, look into this, like maybe try more of these. And then did the hot on your heels, and then the following season was actually, oh yeah, that's kind of when COVID started, was it? Maybe. So I wanted to get into more downhill racing, and then yeah, the Pink Bike Academy happened. So did the whole enduro competition thing there, and then after that, and being at the bike park there, I just love downhill racing. Like I love both, but something about um, just downhill, how like enduro feel like you're kind of giving 80% the whole time because you're kind of trying to conserve your energy, and then downhill is just like 110%, like I want to see how fast I can go. So then I did
That's
the
so rad.
BC Cup, um, the BC Cup races. I did the Dunbar series, and then made third on nationals. So that felt really good, because that was a journey in its own. Both of our cars broke down. It was a really stressful trip, and I was like, I just want this to
So it's
be
not just
over.
the racing, it's the whole
Yeah,
the whole
yeah.
package, yeah.
So when I finally made podium, I was like, oh my God, thank God. I made it. um, so yeah, this year I'm actually doing we're doing the Pemberton Enduro on Saturday, actually.
Oh wow, this Saturday.
Um, yeah, it's came up quick.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And how are you feeling kind of coming into that one? Are you prepared?
um, I mean, it's still kind of early season. I guess I was like focusing on, some bigger hits and some progression on that, and then when we talked about the enduro race, and I was like, okay, yeah, like I can do that. And then
Awesome.
I just got caught up in like the free ridey stuff and work, and then I was like, oh, like I need to be pedaling more, to get ready for this. So I've been trying to put in some big rides the past couple weekends, and then never actually ridden Pemberton before, so I'm excited to ride Pemberton. And I know it's a blind
Wow.
enduro, so it's going to be like a super mega blind enduro.
That's
um,
awesome. You're gonna love it.
yeah, so I'm excited to go ride there, because I know it can be quite different from Squamish in a way. And yeah, just to be around people again and race with people again. I know that's kind of been weird the past couple years. So, and then just to ride somewhere completely new that I've heard so many great things about. So I have that coming up, and then yeah, I was going to look into more of the BC Cup races again this year, but mainly, yeah, just focusing on some free ride stuff this year. So
Wow, that's so rad. It sounds like, you've been up to so much in a relatively short amount of time in terms of the races, the free riding, and all the different stuff you've got going on. So it's so cool to hear that, you're just taking these challenges and, as they come up and, putting your best foot forward. I'd love to dig in a little bit more. You mentioned in the middle there about the Pink Bike Academy. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what is the Pink Bike Academy and how did you find yourself there?
yeah, it's like for people who don't know, I guess it's a mountain biking reality show. Um, and it's about like, and you're competing for a pro contract for, with Orbea, for enduro racing, to be on the enduro racing, the factory team. And I remember it was, yeah, in the middle of COVID. I lost my job, uh, and so I was just kind of hanging out at home. And I remember seeing it pop up, and I'm just like, why not? They're like, oh, make an edit and put it in and apply. And I was like, oh, I've never made an edit before. So had all the time in the world to do that.
Awesome.
So I put
Yeah.
threw something together and applied, and I was like, I'm probably not going to hear from him. And then I got an email, and it was, like the first little caption of it. And it's like, oh, thanks for applying. And I thought it was gonna be like, oh, thanks for applying. We decided to move on with other candidates or whatever. And I opened it, and then it's like, congratulations. I was like, oh, okay. It
That's so
was for an
sick.
interview, and then in the interview, that's when Jason was like, "You're chosen," and I was like, all right, yeah, okay, we're doing this." Um, and I honestly thought it was like, oh, it's gonna be this little thing on Pink Bike, it's not that big of a deal, and people are like, it's a Pink Bike. And I was like,
Yeah,
right, okay.
absolutely.
Then I wound up being on Amazon Prime, and I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah, it turned into like a bigger thing than I was expecting. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just yeah, kind of like how most, maybe not most, but a lot of mountain bikers or trailblazers are quite like introverted and shy and just kind of keep to themselves. Um, so yeah, then I drove out to Big White, and moment I got there, they took my keys, my phone, my wallet, and put a microphone on me, and I just walked right there, like went straight into it. And yeah, so there's a few each day. It's like a new competition, and then there'd be like the elimination at the end. And I won't have any spoiler alerts if anybody hasn't seen the first season. But yeah, it was a really fun experience and a really good time, and I learned so much about biking and about me and my biking, and I met a lot of great people. I saw some familiar faces too, so that was really cool to walk in the room and be like, "Oh, hey, I know you. I'm not alone." No. So yeah, it was. If anybody's thinking about applying for it, just do it, because you never know. And like my thought going into it is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so might as well just give it a go and see where it takes you. And it was good. It was a positive, growing experience. So
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like an amazing experience. And I love your quote on the end there about the missed opportunities. That's so true.
yeah.
I'm curious, we were chatting a little bit off air there at the start about that adjustment going from, being a mainly introverted mountain biker out there in the woods, mainly by ourselves riding bikes, to all of a sudden being on cameras, having a microphone on.
Yeah.
How did you find, your mental state adjust whilst riding all of a sudden with all these people watching you and maybe with the added pressure of like, whoa, I'm going to be on pink bike?
I guess it's kind of hard to explain. It depends on the situation. So like Pink Bike Academy, there were these people and microphones and cameras. We were also with a bunch of really good people that were all like very like-minded. We're all, here for the same thing. We all love bikes and we're all having a good time. But then it was like just us. It wasn't like there was an audience watching you. You're just kind of like, yeah, let's do this. Let's just have a good time and see how it goes. Um, and then again, being mountain bikers, we're also chilled together. It's not like there was that intense reality drama or anything. So it was, at first it was, I mean, when the cameras are there and they're moving around, it can be quite overwhelming. Um, Especially when they rush up on you and you're like, just pretend like they're not there. And you're like, I'm sweating. Anxiety. No. So that was, I mean, that was such a unique experience. I don't even know how to explain it. But as far as other filming, I guess for like, because after that, I remember I did a photo shoot with NF, and I guess my only really photo shoot experience was with that, or actually did kind of a little advert thing when I was back in Aspen. But um, you kind of think like there's that slight pressure of like, oh, I need to perform, but if you push that, it's not going to come off natural, and then it's not going to go very well. So you just have to take a deep breath and just concentrate on the trail in front of you and just do what you would normally do. And I guess tips for shooting is like I learned, like I remember talking to Christina Chipetta, and she was like, well, if you're shooting for photos, like you can really like really throw your elbows up and like kind of you can move slowly but like look aggressive, versus in videos you're like focus, get your rhythm, and hike up, do it again, hike up, do it again, and just like get your rhythm and keep going for it. So that just kind of became, you like slowly start to get used to it, but I can't say I'm quite used to it. In a way, you like start to understand it and know like how things go, I guess. And then like working with Yo on Um, Kelsey's wonderful, and she's just like such a good person to be around. You don't feel it. There's like no pressure whatsoever at all, and especially with what we're doing, it can be quite stressful in itself when you're thinking about the feature. You know, you don't want to be thinking about, oh, the video. Oh no. There's no pressure in that. It's like, well, if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. Like if it's today's not your day, then like don't even worry about it. We can always do it again.
Yeah, that's so rad to hear the process behind that. It sounds like you've done a really good job at surrounding yourself with some really good people as well.
Yeah.
Not only for advice on, how they approach, different shoots, but also on, just the general feel of the ride so that there's not that pressure to maybe overperform when you're not feeling it just because the camera's there. So good to hear. And you mentioned at the end there you're doing some work with Johan. I'd love to dig into that one a little bit deeper. I know it's probably a more recent thing you've been doing. You actually made Johan Borelli's new progression team.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about that. What can you tell us about Johan's new team?
Um, yeah, that was really exciting. I remember he actually messaged me on Instagram, and it was one of those like, he knows I exist. I was like, the Johan, really?
And was that just a random message, or was that after the application?
There wasn't an application for the team.
Okay.
He just reached out to me.
Wow.
And I was like, no way.
Yeah.
And then we tried to link up for a ride, and we wound up just chatting over the phone. And I remember him talking about the team, throwing out these ideas, and he's like, "So what do you think?" And I'm like, "What do I think?" And I'm just like, yeah, it sounds awesome. So we just kept chatting, got the ball rolling, and everybody on the team's it's awesome that everyone's awesome, and they all have their unique focus and goals and different styles, and it's not like your traditional, I guess, race team, and the pressure of having to get like results, or it's kind of like about your journey and like what you're focusing on, and the support there, and getting to where you want to go, and even like learning more about what's out there and what you're capable of doing, especially if you have um, like a lot of support behind you. So that's been, I'm like, it's only the beginning, So I'm really excited to see how this season goes.
Yeah, it sounds like such a cool opportunity. And like, what does it look like being on the team? Are you guys getting out for weekly rides? Do you kind of plan goals together? What are you up to generally within that?
Yeah, it's been busy, I guess, because
Yeah, I
we're
bet.
each person is trying to, achieve their different goals. So, and then of course, Johan has like his coaching business, and Flavio has his coaching, and everybody's juggling their lives and their goals. And there's been a few rides, and like we're all kind of spread out in the valley. It's not like all of us kind of live in one place. So like sometimes that's challenging of wanting to like ride with everyone. And I know when the summer kicks off, we'll really be able to probably link up and connect more. And like Pemberton, we're all planning to do the race this weekend, so it'll be super sweet to get to see everyone and ride there, and yeah, connect on more rides. Yeah, it's still so, I guess, early and fresh that it's lots of planning and and trying to make things happen. So yeah.
Ah, that's right. I think that's one of the best things about this time of year, isn't it? Just kind of everyone's planning, everyone's getting excited for the summer, and maybe putting all of these things in place, that energy kind of starts to build.
Yeah.
I know you haven't been starting slowly though. I know there's been lots of videos of you out there with Johan and with the team, hitting some of the biggest gaps and biggest drops around the sea to sky here. I'm curious, like, how did you guys on the team? How did you come up with some of your goals? Was there any kind of process there, or were these things that you've wanted to do for years?
Yeah, some of the things is like, oh, I've had my eye on that on a while. So it was like him asking like, what are your goals? Like what is something, because we built up the bike, so obviously our first hits on it, we didn't just want to go to something completely insane. It's
Yeah.
like uh really getting to know how the bike's going to feel on these types of features, because that's what I'm aiming for, and getting used to that. So I knew like when I hit Shameless, I knew that that one would be, I'm like, I know I can do this because I've done something like this before. So it wasn't like I was just throwing myself into like this huge feature. I'm like, that would be awesome. I'm totally out of my element, but that would be cool. It was I knew the steps I was taking were like safe steps. Um, and so I was like, oh, I've done something like this before. I've always gone past that trail. And like, you know what, someday I'm gonna do those. It's gonna be great. So um we went up and warmed up on some smaller jumps. So I knew kind of like how it would feel trying to throw the bike around or popping with it, but you know, and then it's also like so planted and fast, and so just really connecting with that, and then moving to those jumps, and then we wound up sessioning those because they were just it was so much fun, and then deciding like, yeah, let's go check out Poacher. Like I'm feeling good, I'm feeling it. So we went down, and you know, like there's a small drop to warm up and a couple little jumps to warm up, and then you come to the big the big one at the bottom.
Yeah, for those that don't know, that's like a trail gap, isn't it? Almost like a road gap, but it.
Yeah, so you're actually gapping over the lowdown trail that goes underneath it. Um, so you had a jump before, and it's actually like a sharp left-hand turn into the drop, um, which that's the most intimidating thing. Like you look at the drop and you're like, oh, sweet ass, like it's a drop. Um, which I guess when you're warming, if you're just starting drops, yes, that drop can look quite
Yeah.
quite huge. But it was for me, it was like the corner going into it.
Right. So
Um,
by the time you get to that drop, are you going quite slow? Or by the time you get to the takeoff?
uh, yeah, you like,
Because of the corner?
well, you actually you like don't need as much speed as you think you would.
Okay.
You know, looking at the size of that gap, you're like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna have to go really fast to clear that. Um, but actually, Johan did it. He started at the corner. He didn't even. He's like, I'm curious. Like, do I have enough speed from here? So he skipped the whole trail part and just started right at like, uh, like, here's the drop, and then like, here's the trail, and like, here's Johan. He's like, I'm just gonna start from here and see if I have enough
That's
speed.
super impressive.
And it was like perfect. Like, oh, you don't even, you know, it's such a mental battle because you're like, it seems so big.
Wow. Yeah, that must have been nice for your confidence. Just to know that, wow, even if I carry zero speed through that corner, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah, it's you could literally come to like a complete stop and then give it a few pedal strokes, and then you're golden after that. So yeah, watching him hit it a couple times and then doing run-ins to me is important, but not like too many because then you can start overthinking it and psyching yourself out.
When you do your run-ins, are you generally, following someone like Johan, or are you just doing a run-in, by yourself on the trail?
I do my so first I go look at the feature from different angles, and then I get on to like the takeoff of the drop, and I see like what am I going to be looking at and what do I need to look at, and slowly back up and see like when see a lot of stuff like that. The landing's blind,
Mm,
so you kind of need to know like if there's a tree that's sticking up, I'm going to look at that tree because as long as I'm looking at that tree, it takes me straight into the the landing.
right.
So kind of start from the takeoff, back up from there, and then reverse it. You're coming in. I'm holding my imaginary handlebars, picturing myself on my bike and like walking into it a few times, and then I'm gonna like watch somebody, um, and I can even follow them in to get the right speed. I won't hit it yet, and then do a couple run-ins myself until I'm like, okay, body positioning, like my line feels good, my sight feels good, and I think the speed feels good, and then just go for it and keeping yourself calm. Don't think about the what ifs. Don't think about, just picture all of the right things, what you need to look at, um, when you should be braking. So obviously not braking through the corner, brake before the corner, and just keeping like deep breath and not letting your nerves even touch you.
Wow. Such a good mentality.
Keep it calm
Yeah.
and you'll be good.
And do you ever have kind of off days where some of that's just not quite working? And if
Yeah,
so, like, how do you
100%.
approach that? Yeah.
I think and I know sometimes when you're riding with buddies, like you can almost get that, I wouldn't say peer pressure, but you almost put pressure on yourself. Especially if it's something you're like, oh, I know I could do it, or I've done it before a while ago, or something like that. But making the right decisions, like everybody has off days. It could be from lack of sleep, or it could be what you ate in the morning, or you just had a long week, or you went to the gym the day before and you're just kind of fatigued. It could be multiple things. And like the last weekend, actually, I had a bit of a off. It got better. It got better. But I guess it was decision making again. I was trying to prepare for the Enduro, so I was kind of going over what the Squamish Enduro course was a couple of years back. But instead of taking Rigs of Zen, I took Pleasure Trail. So Rigs of Zen on Trail Forks is a black, Pleasure Trail is a double black. But I'm like, oh, I've ridden it before, the whole thing, and I felt fine. I love that trail. It's beautifully built, and I love it. And like, I haven't been on it in over a year probably. And I pedaled up there and I went into it, and I'm just like, this is way gnarlier than I remember. And I was
Yeah,
just all
absolutely.
over the place. And I was trying not to get frustrated because, like, you kind of get off your line, or you just kind of feel like your balance just feels off and you just can't
Mm.
quite get it there. And so I'd stop and be like, okay, just get myself in the right headspace.
So you do some breathing to kind of calm yourself back down when you start feeling frustrated, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I just stop, and like, breathing's huge to me.
Mm.
And then just like flipping a switch in your brain instead of being like, oh, I'm so frustrated, and be like, okay, restart. Looking at what's coming. Do I have enough running? Like, let's say there's a technical section for me. Oh, maybe I should hike back up a little way so I can get my feet on my pedals right and actually get on my bike and before I proceed. But that's like easier said than done, because sometimes, like, once you get off your bike once, you kind of mess up your rhythm and you can't quite get into it the whole way down. And then it's easy just to be like, God, like, why can't I do this? Um, so it was just one of those, like, just let's just make it down. You don't have to go through all the rock features, or it's just one of those moments or one of those days. Who knows? So I get down and I'm like, okay, maybe Pleasure Trail wasn't the best warm up idea. Like, that's on me. I hadn't ridden in a few days. So I was like, okay, on to the next trail. It's going to be better. And it slowly got better, but it was just kind of one of those, like, anytime I got on my bike, I was kind of like, my balance just felt off. And when you feel like that, I guess just don't push yourself. Like, just listen to that and be like, let's just take it chill. But don't get complacent, like, oh, I'm just taking it chill, because you're still feeling off. You could easily hurt yourself just as bad on, like, the fire road on the way down than you
Yeah.
could on, like a gnarly trail. So just keeping your mind in it, but listening to those, I guess, those signs to make sure that you're, because sometimes you can figure out a way to switch back into it, but everybody has those days,
Yeah,
and
that's,
that's okay.
such wise advice, I think. And so true, no one operates at like 100% all of the time, in biking or anything else, I don't think.
Yeah.
So I think it's a huge part, like you mentioned there, just accepting that, that's okay. And, toning it down sometimes is completely fine as well. And I love your point at the end there, though, not to, tone it down so much that we're, so relaxed we end up crashing on something really easy.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's yeah.
So many good points in there. I'm curious, we're talking lots about riding and what we've learned or what you've learned about riding. Is there anything that riding's taught you about life?
Uh yeah. Patience. Um yeah, I think patience is a good one. And also, I guess I don't know how to explain it, but there has been lessons on the bike. Um just like the way you look at things. I guess, for example, when I first moved here and there's stuff I look at, I'm like, I will never in my life ride that. Are you kidding me? And now, I'm writing it, and it's just like respecting the process and don't get discouraged. Um, and then also, I guess, when you're having those off days or you really want something, like working up to Brutus uh, was one of those for me.
Yeah, and I'm
And
sorry to cut you off there. You can keep going if you like. I just thought of a question.
sure, yeah, go for it.
You mentioned Brutus there, and kind of working up to Brutus. I'd love to dig into the process behind that if we can.
Yeah, it was a process, to
Yeah,
say the least, for me. Because I've had similar features that didn't seem as difficult, but I
yeah. And
I saw it.
why do you think that was? For those that don't know,
Um,
Brutus is a very sizable road gap on Cypress Mountain here in West Vancouver.
yeah, yeah. So we saw like some friends hit it. So then me and my partner were talking about hitting it. So we went up. We would ride at Cypress and go check it out. It's right at the bottom. Um, and I was like, "Ooh," I remember first seeing it. I was like, never. Are you kidding me? And then it's slowly like, even the bike park helped me hugely, honestly. And then just getting more comfortable about being in the air and then going and seeing it again and be like, no, I could do this. This is doable. Um, and trying to find similar features, not like the same size necessarily, but like kind of same feel into the run in, like blind landing, stuff like that. And then slowly going bigger and bigger until you're comfortable. And then I actually wound up tearing my ACL a few weeks before we were wanting to go do it. Yeah, it was on something again, don't get complacent. Like we were sessioning a jump, we were sessioning the hip at the bike park and on Dirt Merchant. And it's one of those like even hiking it, and I just put my foot down and then like, yeah, so don't get complacent. Um, but so then there was that recovery process, and I actually used to work at Cypress. So I drove past it every day on my way to work, just
Jeez.
staring at it like, I'm coming for you. Um, and then more of our friends they're like, oh, I finally hit it. I'm like, I want to too. um, and then still going to hike and look at it. And then as I was getting better, wasn't quite ready to be in the air yet. Go and I did a couple run-ins, and I'm just like, okay, okay. And I think it was just like such a long buildup and driving past it every day and just thinking about it all the time. Uh, to where the season I was like, I want to do it, and I want to do it now. Like I just want to get it out of my system because it's been building up for so long. And so we went and rode at Cypress and with some buddies, and then I just had one thing on my mind, and it was Brutus. And I was like, I want to get down there, and I want to give myself some time. Uh, and then speaking of cameras and people and audiences, that was actually really difficult because this is a big deal to me. It was
Yeah.
like my nerves started to really like my heart was pounding. I started to get really anxious. And there's a bunch of hikers around,
Jeez.
and because there's like a little pop-up village there, so there's people riding. Like there's some people on bikes coming to check it out as well. But there's so many just day hikers, and the minute you're on top of that thing, people are like, oh, what's that? Like, oh, are you gonna hit it? I'm like, not when you're standing there. And I was just like, carry on, just just move
Yeah,
on.
it's funny, isn't it?
Um,
I think some of the hikers kind of walk through there not knowing that there's a gap across the top,
yeah, and they're like,
and
oh,
they're just
whoa,
kind
and
of
then
going about their business. It's like,
exactly, and then they all pull out their phones, like, do it, do it. I'm like, well, I can't do it now. Like that's just so much like extra pressure. Um,
right, so I'm gonna stop you right there. How did you handle that in that moment where you're like, holy shit, I've got my own cameras here, my own team here, there's other riders, there's hikers, there's iPhones out filming me. Like, what did you
yeah,
do in the moment?
it was like I felt like that similar stage fright that I got in like the sixth grade play. But I was like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on the one thing. Okay, remembering my points. Okay, I'm gonna look at that tree when I'm running into it. There's my landing. I watched a few people hit it, and luckily this younger kid that hit it before came through, and he hit it, so that got rid of a lot of the camera people, the iPhone people, which kind of felt good. I was like, thanks.
Sweet.
Um, so I just removed myself from that. I took my bike and I
Hmm.
went back to the beginning of the trail where you would restart, just to be separated from that and just to reset and pretend they're not there. I'm like,
Yeah,
nobody's there,
great.
just they don't exist. As long as I yell dropping, they'll know to move out of the way in case if somebody's walking underneath the drop. Um, and that one I did quite a few run-ins just because of their nerves just kept like there's that commitment point when you're on your bike. You reach a certain
Hmm.
point and you're like, if that's your decision making, like you have to do it at this point. Like you cannot be touching your brakes. You have to be fully committed. Should be no doubt, no fear, no second guessing in your head. and I'd come up to the point and then be like, ah, like slam on my brakes. So I just had to find something similar that I've hit before, just to put that in my head. Even though if it, I chose like the second big drop on Dirt Merchant. I know it's quite different. You're on a big, wide, groomed bike park trail, but it was just that, just thinking about the drop and the feeling of being in the air. So I wasn't worried about the takeoff necessarily. I wasn't worried about the landing. I was worried about like the dead sailor in the air, when you just kind of freeze and you're just like,
Mm.
like I
Yeah,
can't do
worst
anything.
nightmare, hey?
That's yeah, that's like the most terrifying thing. Um, and so I was like, dirt merchant, dirt merchant, dirt merchant. And so I finally just took a lot of deep breaths. I pictured that drop in my head. I pictured the landing and the run out of Brutus. And then I pedaled into it, and I just held really tight on my handlebars at the commitment point. I'm like, commit, just get it over with. Like it's not going to get any easier. And I know when people are like, oh, I'm just waiting for the right moment. Sometimes that just doesn't come. That makes sense. So there's like a split second where you're like, that's my moment. You just
Yeah.
have to completely trust yourself. You're like, I know I am perfectly capable of doing it. It was one of those like 90% mental, 10% skill. Like obviously I could do it. It was just all in my head.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
sorry, I'm going on, but yeah, that
No,
was
this is great. It's so cool to hear the process behind that. Because I was going to say, like, I seen the video, on Instagram and on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, rad, like, Nicole hit Brutus. But it's so
yeah.
cool to hear that, the whole process and the whole journey behind that, is so
Yeah.
much longer. And, like, I haven't hit Brutus myself. I've looked at it when friends are hitting it, and I'm like, yeah, cool, like, I can see how that works. But I'm not sure about the process. So it's so
Yeah.
cool to hear, from someone who's done it and someone who's really thought about this and really broken it down. Some of the tools that you've got in your toolkit that you've got there to use, in situations like that. So yeah, feel
Yeah.
free to go on about these things as much as you like. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just have this be quick to judge of like, oh, well, you hit big hits all the time, like assume that's what I live for and that's what I do every single time I'm on my bike. Like that's not true. And um like we do like to go and chill rides. We do have off days, and then coming to big features like that, sometimes those bigger features, like there was features when we were down in Virgin that were way easier. I looked at it, I'm like, doable, sweet, okay. Do a couple of run-ins, and because it's just like there wasn't that relationship with it. Like with Brutus, it was just kind of like that build up. So it was,
Speaking of like relationships with features, do you find it interesting, living here in the Sea to Sky where there's lots of almost like famous features that everyone's talking about, everyone's hitting during summer, everyone's kind of got a different opinion on these features. Do you
yeah.
find that kind of, plays into your perception a little bit as well? As opposed to, traveling somewhere and just being like, cool, here's this drop I didn't know was here.
Yeah, and it kind of like it depends on who you talk to. Like one feature you could hear four different opinions on it, and then of course your mind can start go running and be like, oh my god, it's actually way more complicated than I thought, when it's
Yeah.
really not. Like don't let people get in your head. You can like, okay, hear other people's experiences and opinions of writing it, and everybody has their own unique style, and then just kind of go off of how you feel on your bike, what you're comfortable, what you've done before, and look at it. And if you feel confident in that day, like sweet. There's been some days where like the rest of the group's like totally not feeling it, and normally you could be like, oh, okay, like maybe maybe I shouldn't. It's kind of, maybe that means it's dangerous if nobody else is feeling it. But there's been days I look at it, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. And you just do it, and you're like, oh, that was great. Sweet. So these famous features, it's kind of cool to live here now. I remember being in Colorado and seeing this, and I'm like, oh, the wonders, and being here and being able to see it in person, and ride every the features myself is, it feels so good. Yeah, but I mean, there is some features that have a lot of talk and build up, and people are like, oh, you should do it, and you're like, actually, that one just doesn't seem appealing to me. Like I just don't want to. Um, so yeah, I guess I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, absolutely you did. And I love that point at the end there as well that, sometimes, our buddies or our friends that are riding at the same level as us might be hitting features that we, theoretically should be able to hit ourselves, but it's also okay just to be like, oh, I don't really like the look of that one, or I don't like the feel of that trail. And that's okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that stance. And I know you mentioned earlier, kind of in that whole build up to hitting Brutus, that you had an injury, you tore your ACL. Kind of leads into
Yeah.
another question I wanted to ask you. I'm curious, what's been one of your biggest challenges on the bike?
Um, Honestly, just the mental, like those mental days can be the hardest days.
Yeah,
Um, when you're trying not to like, and again, it all kind of, I feel like what leads into that is how you're taking care of yourself or how much sleep you got. I feel like the nights that I haven't slept much, like there's been some nights even out in the desert where we're camping, and sometimes camping isn't the most fairy tale beautiful night of sleep that you ever had. And
yeah, I
then you're
totally
like
hear you.
sick, yeah, let's go ride bikes, like I'm feeling good, and then you get to a feature and you're just kind of, yeah, you're just kind of fatigued, you're tired, you're not quite on it. And so I feel like in those moments my mind can kind of get the best of me. And there was a drop there. I was like, I never really guinea pigged anything before, so I think that was the hardest part. I kept like over calculating in my head, like, was it fast enough, was it too slow, I don't know, oh my god. and and then when I hit it, I had this like huge rush of relief. Like I even just like caved over my handlebars, like, oh my god. Like, oh, I did it. Like I finally like yeah, then that was just, I was actually so exhausted after that, and all I did was hit one feature. Like it wasn't like
Yeah,
we went on some insane long ride and did this crazy spine. It was just this one feature. It was just the mental battle. And then when it was finally over, like that big release, same with Brutus, I had a huge release. Like, do you want to go hit it again? I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, it wasn't like Poacher. It was like, yeah, let's go hit it again. Or Shameless, like, yeah, let's go hit it again. It's kind of one of those like, yeah, I'm content, and I think that's good. We can come back a different day. So,
yeah, wow.
I know
Sounds
injuries
almost
can be
like,
hard.
oh, go on.
Uh, Sorry, I know injuries can be hard, and coming back from those, and you're not going to be at the same place you were. That can be hard, but you know that you're healing, and you know you're gonna get there. But yeah, I think some people are like, oh, like I bet your knee was really difficult, and it actually wasn't too bad. And like with the knee, pedaling's actually good for it, so I could go at least like ride my bike around. So that kept me sane. But yeah, I think, yeah, the hardest thing for me would be some of those mental days for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like I was going to say there, like, when you're finally going off this drop that you've been thinking about, I mean, sussing out for so long and you're feeling like these feelings of relief. It sounds little bit like, just like mental strain or mental overload because there's been so much work, happening behind the scenes in order for your brain to get your body to do this thing you want to
Yeah.
do. And I'm curious, do you experience a similar kind of like mental strain or mental overload like after a race run?
Um, I guess it depends on how the race run went. Like last year at nationals, it was the last race of the three, like back to back to back. And that, yeah, that's when like our cars broke down and there was like really bad forest fire smoke. And so going up to that and practicing, like I didn't quite feel right. As you're going into it, you're like trying to picture the run and the lines in your head, and you're like, oh, it's nationals, like I think racing can put a bit of pressure as well. Um, you're like, I want to do my best, like, and how much like a crash or a flat can cost you, and you come all this way, you spent all this money, and those pressures can build up, and it comes down to like this one race run. And in the moment, like honestly, that race run for me didn't feel the best, and I did come off the track just a little bit, and in that moment I was like, it's over. I'm like, just keep going though. You're like so bummed, and it feels like eternity, but it's like 2 minutes. And then you get to the bottom and you're just, yeah, you kind of feel like that. Ugh. But then seeing the result, you're like, oh my god, like that was way better than I thought it was gonna be. And that's amazing, and you're like so stoked. But then you get the little voice in your head like, oh, if I didn't come off the track, could I have gotten second, or could I have gotten it's just like never ending kind of chitter chatter. for me at least. But
Yeah. And are you kind of quick to squash some of that chitter chatter that might kind of seep in sometimes?
yeah, I think that's one thing. Another thing like biking's helped me with is I guess like in everyday life you can get a bit of that self-talk and that chitter chatter in your head, and being able to like put it in a bubble and then like above your head and then like pop it. Like
Huh.
no, or some of
Yeah, I
those
love that
thoughts you can
analogy.
like oh I'm not like I need to think about this later. I'll just put it in a bubble and like I'll come back to that later. But some of those negative thoughts is like that just that mental image for me, I guess. Like I put a little bubble and I just like I'm like, no, I don't need you right now.
Yeah,
Get out
that's
of
great.
here. I need to be in the moment and you're distracting me. You're not helping. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow, it seems like you're up to so much. Seems like almost like endless energy. You're racing, you're doing free riding, you're filming, you're working, doing all this stuff. What is it that makes you passionate and gets you motivated to do all of these things?
Um well I guess cliche, you only live once, I guess. And when I am doing these things, I really feel good when I'm doing these things. And and everything keeps going so well and you just keep getting excited and I guess like always seeing the love for life and things that like my parents had growing up, and always wanting to see like life out of my dad's eyes and like how stoked he is on everything, and he just keeps going out there and just keeps getting after it, and how much I would like want to share this with him because like I know him and my uncle used to go rally bikes all the time, and like how my uncle raced and how that was back then and now how the
Right.
scene is now, and he's like always asking me about it, um, and just to be so inspired by that, and also like just the challenges I've overcome. I'm like it's easy to get down, and I'm like no, you have to keep moving forward, you just have to keep moving and just to keep going towards that stuff, and that amazing relief or that overwhelming joy that you get when you accomplish something that you've been working towards so much, and to uh like if my younger self were to see me right now she'd be like no way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I've never thought, I mean even I didn't leave Colorado till I was like 23 or 24. Like I didn't think I would ever leave. That was like well happy place. And just traveling and moving to a different country and how amazing all of these things are here. And like there's just more out there, and um I just got to keep exploring and having fun and really cherish those moments on your bike and when you're outside and when you're with people, and um yeah, just kind of keeps all the good keeps you going even though you do crash hard, you do have really rough days, and but it's all worth it. It all pays off, and yeah.
Absolutely. And your parents sound like an amazing influence there. I'm curious, did they get you riding bikes at a young age? Were they out riding with you? Or are they into kind of other sports?
Um, they were pretty supportive of like anything we wanted to do, but I remember we'd always go on like family rides. Um, and all of us were young. It could just be like um, little bike paths around town, or we would go into like Glenwood Canyon is this beautiful canyon in Colorado, just down valley from Aspen. And I remember there'd be a path next to the river. We'd like all ride on our bikes, even like training wheels even. I can't remember. All the way to the where the hiking trail of Hanging Lake would start, and just getting us out on these beautiful scenic rides and just spending time together um, was a big part of my childhood memories. And like I remember always going to the campgrounds and farting around on my bike and and finding little trails there. And my dad would always be on the hunt for old bikes he could mend together, and we'd be riding those. Like we grew up on, we call them like Franken bikes and stuff because
That's right. Yeah.
we find one bike and then another and kind of like piece together so it all works. So yeah, that was, I think big was just the love for outside and getting us out there, and of course bikes is probably a way quicker way to get your kids out and about and running around.
Yeah, absolutely. So cool looking back on all of that and just seeing what it's grown into.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the best bit of advice a mentor, whether it's your parents or one of your mountain biking mentors, what's the best bit of advice that a mentor's ever given you about mountain biking or about mindset?
Um, I mean, when we were going through doing poacher and like my video with Yo on, just having your process and figuring that out, knowing what you need and taking the steps to where you feel confident, you feel comfortable. There's no like you're just you're in a good space. And just keeping those like keep looking forward and towards like the more positive things. You never want to think of like the things you could hit when you fall or like all those bad things. Like
Yeah.
never you don't even mention it.
So I totally agree. Don't look at what can go wrong. Don't even think about that. But are you looking at it at all? Say if there's a tree that's rather close to the landing, do you like do you look at it at all? And then if
um
so, like how quickly do you stop thinking about that tree?
it could just be uh yeah, like here's our exposure or here's our caution. Yes, that's there, moving on. Like
Okay,
this is
yeah.
the things you need to be looking at, because if you say like don't hit that tree or don't look at that tree, you're going to look at that tree and then you're going to wind up, you never look at what you're trying to avoid. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of, I think the red flags are obvious and not to dwell on those. Just always picture yourself making it, I guess, and taking the right steps to make yourself feel comfortable, like, doing the walking up to it, then the run-ins, and then, or if you take one glance at it and you're like, sweet as, I totally got this, and just go for it, I guess.
No, that's great advice, and great to hear it as well. I'm sure most of us as mountain bikers have probably lived that experience where we do accidentally get focused in on what we
Yeah,
don't want to hit or what could go wrong, and then that's exactly what happens. So
yeah.
it's cool to hear the right way of doing it. And I'm curious if you're able to share this. It's okay if you're not, but is that very similar to Johan's process? Or is that different? I'll have to get him on here one day to ask him myself, but dying to ask the question right now.
I feel it a bit similar, like in the video when we're walking through things. He's kind of like, "This is your process," and I was like, "Oh yes, it's very similar to what I've always kind of had in my head
Great.
moving into a feature." So I kind of synced in. So yeah, and I think anytime you watch him, he's very yeah, he goes through his steps and goes through the
Mm.
whole um, breaking it down, and you're like point A to point B and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear. He's not just, telling you like press here, brake here, land here. He's, walking you through the whole process of what you're thinking, what you're feeling,
Yeah, yeah,
what you're doing all the way leading up to that.
yeah. It's all positive, good vibes.
Yeah, and when you get to a feature, are you kind of thinking about, right, these are, the 10 steps we're going to follow in our process to get to our objective? Or are you kind of just
um,
like hit and go and following through the
yeah, I
steps?
guess it
Yeah.
it just depends. It depends on the trail and the feature and your experience, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And do you ever have like a motto or anything you repeat to yourself in your head while you're riding to keep yourself grounded?
I guess I have a few things.
Yeah.
One that pops to my head, just because we've been talking about big features and mindset going into those, is just if I ever feel like overwhelmed or like um, yeah, the fear monster, I guess, is like taking control of my brain. If there's any doubt, I just tell myself like I can do all things. Just keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Just like I guess that saying like you can do anything you set your mind to, which you like literally can. It's all about your headspace to me. It's like I can do all things. And if
Mm.
like this thing, I can do this. How
Yeah.
can I do this? Okay, let's just like start breaking it down. And it might not be today. It's like I want to do that someday. Um, okay, let's figure out how we're gonna do it. Um, so yeah, I guess that would be a big one that pops up.
That's
Um,
fantastic. Just that like can-do mindset, filling the brain with cans so that no can'ts can
yeah.
seep in. I love it. That's fantastic. So, from your perspective as a mountain biker that's, achieved some pretty impressive stuff, both in racing and in free riding, and just in, having a good time out there on a bike, being able to achieve that regularly, what's the biggest obstacle that you see other people out there facing in achieving their riding goals?
Um, how do I explain this one?
It's okay, take your time.
I feel like sometimes, like even if I meet new people and they want to get into biking, like, oh, we should go on a ride sometime. And then it's kind of that, I guess, that negative self-talk or, um, oh, I could never do that, or um, like, oh, riding with you, like I can't go hit those jumps or anything. I'm like, I'm not saying that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, it's
If you
funny.
don't
Yeah.
want to do it, you don't want to do it. Or like, oh, I'd love to do that someday, but it's kind of just that. Yeah, I think that accepting that they can't, even though they totally could.
Hmm.
It's just how they think. They automatically just like accept defeat without. Yeah, I think that's what holds a lot of people back is
Yeah, that's a
it's
good
being
point.
like, yeah, there's no way. Instead of like, oh, if I ride my bike, like when I first moved here, or even when I first hopped on a bike, of course I wouldn't come to the stuff I'm hitting today
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
do it. Or even like I know there is stuff in the valley I came up to and I looked at and I was like, yeah, right. And now I look at it and I'm just like, oh, that's actually not that bad. It's crazy how it's almost like when you go to a place when you're a kid and then you go as you're an adult and you're like, this feels so much smaller than it was.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing. You're like, this seems so much smaller than I remember. Um,
No, that's such a good point. Our perception is constantly changing as we grow and we progress.
yeah,
So things that we once thought were, huge and scary may not necessarily be anymore. So I think that's such
yeah.
a, important point to touch on to not rule things out in your mind. Um,
Even if it's buying, like getting the bike you want. Like I was on a 2008 stump jumper for the longest time. The rear shock was blown. It was like a pogo stick. I went over the bars because of it,
Jeez.
and super steep head tube angle and 26-inch and the two derailleurs front and back. And love the bike to death. I absolutely love that thing. Her name was Andrea, um, and then I was like, how? Like I want to be able to get one of those big shiny new bikes, like, and I'm ready for that, but how? I'm like, there's no way I'd ever be able to afford that. How am I going to afford that? And I'm not saying everybody do this, but I moved into my truck for a summer to save up for the bike, and um I got the Juliana Striga at the time is what it was. And
Nice.
but with something that seemed impossible, I'm like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to pursue mountain biking. Are you kidding me? Have you seen the price tag on that thing? That's insane. But I was like, no, I'm not going to let that ruin it for me. You make
Yeah.
connections and you just do it.
I love that attitude. It's not like, oh, I can't make this happen. It's like, well, how can I make this happen?
Yeah,
And maybe we make other sacrifices in other areas of our life in order to achieve those goals. But if they're important to us, it's totally worth it, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So you mentioned there, a crash on a pogo stick bike. I'm sure you don't crash as much these days now that you've got, such solid technical skills and mental skills to go with it. But if you ever do have a little slip over or even a bigger crash, do you have any kind of process that you put in place now to help minimize, any mental blocks or anything that might come up because of that crash?
Yeah, I mean, I still crash. I think everybody does. Sometimes it's something simple like you're coming through a corner and then you wind up it's a matter of a split second of looking at that tree and I lean
Yeah.
towards it and then like your front wheel slips out or something and you're like, well, that could be avoided. And you tumble and you're just like some of them you're just like, ha, all right, get up, let's keep going.
Yeah.
And some of them there can be those harder crashes where people are like, are you okay? And you're like, give me a second, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let the adrenaline run off and you're like, I think I'm good. And it could be, frustrating if it's like end of the day and then there's that one crash and you break something on your bike, or like you sprain something and you're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to ride for a couple weeks. That's so frustrating. And thinking about how it could have been avoided, but it's just like, it is what it is. Don't get hung up on it. Just think of a way that what you can do to get back on your bike faster.
Mm,
So making sure you're taking care of yourself. And I know in the adult life of like having a job can be stressful too. You're like, how am I going to be able to work? Which funds this? Which funds this? Which funds mountain biking for me? Can be stressful. And I mean, I feel like I still have a pretty solid crash maybe once a year, knock on wood. Um,
yeah, sounds
and
pretty accurate.
like last year, I guess we were hiking crabapple hits at Whistler. There was like a slight headwind, but I saw some people hit it and I waited and I was like, oh, I think it's fine. Like it's the slightest breeze. Like I'll be fine. And then I cased the first bigger one. And I was like, no, I still got it. I gave it a couple pedal strokes and I went into it and I was like, yep, I'm just like losing so much speed in the air. And I landed nose heavy, the front wheel washed out, and I felt like one of my biggest fears. I'm like, don't ever fall in cry bubble hits because you're probably never gonna walk away. Um,
Yeah.
and I fell like right onto my shoulder and I broke this collarbone before. So like, when like you're in a moment and it's happening so fast, but your brain actually just slows everything down. Because that initial like, oh no, my shoulder, and then rolling backward and like hitting my head and it hurt. But I've like had a I have bad head injury history. So then I was worried about that. And then I like roll over and tumble a few times and I'm just like sliding down the landing. And then there's so many people hiking it that my first reaction was like, get up, get out of the way. So I kind of like rolled myself out of the side of the landing and I sat there and people are like, are you good? And I was just like, give me a second. Like, I don't know yet. I'm like, well, I'm still conscious. That's good. I'm like, my shoulder doesn't feel like it's broken again. So we're good. And it was kind of like that checklist, grabbing my bike out of the way and then just staring at the jump, like, man, like what happened? Like, it's so frustrating and like pretty discouraging. And for something, for me, for a feature that size, I'm like, I don't want this to ruin it for me. And I've had that with a few things. Like I fall and you're like, I'm never doing that again. I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want this to ruin it for me. So I was like, I might hike up and go do it again just because I don't want this relationship to build of coming up here and being like, I don't know. But the wind kind of picked up and another person hit it and they cased it really hard. And I'm like, actually, no, I think maybe we should call it. And like my body started to cool down and I started to stiffen up and I was like, oh, I don't know if we should probably get down to the car. We're parked on Creekside, which is on the other side. So we had to go down, back up, go down. And yeah, my body was really starting to like tense up and then my ribs started to hurt. And I was like, oh, it feels super weird. I don't know about that. And then we're going down and the more I'm moving, the more it's hurting. I was like, I think I might have hurt a rib. But I'm like, I feel like it would hurt more than that. I don't really know. And so I went and got it checked the next day and I wound up like cracking one of my lower ribs. It wasn't anything
Oh man.
awful. And I think it was like the floating rib. But I was like, don't get in your head. Don't let this get in your head. Don't let this ruin that for you. Like you'll go back, like you'll redeem yourself. Just take it super easy. Even when you start to heal and feel better, like don't push it because you could make it worse again. But walking away from that one was a bit hard because I guess I wasn't scared of the jump. I was scared of being scared of the jump after that. And there's those falls have happened quite often, and you're like, I have to go back and I have to redeem myself, or else, it's kind of over. It's like,
Yeah, it seems like a pretty common way of, dealing with not getting a mental block immediately after, having a bad
yeah,
experience on a trail or a feature. But I'm curious, in this circumstance where it's just like it wasn't going to happen for you to hit the jump again that day, have you been back to that same jump at Whistler and, gone through the process to hit it again?
I I want to say yes.
Yeah.
It was the very end of the summer. So I can't remember if the bike park closed or not. I'm pretty sure it went. I'm pretty sure I went back up and
Yeah.
did it.
It must have all went well then, if there's nothing that stands out.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If there's nothing, then I'm like, oh God, no. But I guess like going back to that other question of what do you see what holds people back? And then so many
Mm,
times I hear people are like, never doing that again because I fell. That one time I
mm,
fell. I'm never doing that again. And it's just like, well, there's gonna be those. It's gonna be difficult, but you can fight through it like you can do it again.
yeah,
And I feel like that can stump a lot of people's progression because they had one bad experience and they're just like,
that
oh,
is true.
never again.
I think I often try to remind myself it's like, okay, that happened, but I know I can ride it again. I'm going to take a couple of steps back. I'm going to break down the process, both
Yeah,
technical skills and mental, and then I'm going to come back with a stronger skill set and make it happen.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's again on your point of not just wiping things out and saying, I'm never going to hit that again. Because as soon as
Yeah,
we kind of declare something as, being too hard for us or being out of our league, well, it is, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Switching gears a little bit here, I'd love to know if you got any cool projects or rides coming up that you can tell us about.
Yeah, I had Falwell Canyon on my mind quite a bit. I've never been up there in Williams Lake.
Oh,
So
awesome.
that's on my list. We're talking about trying to make that happen, trying to figure out dates, um, and get out there with Johan.
Rad.
Also, Kamloops is always on the list every year. And I know Fistful of Dollars, the jump line there, haven't done uh, that whole trail, so that would be good to get up to Kamloops. And then even making it down to Bellingham and uh, Blue Steel, that jump line I haven't hit.
Awesome.
Um,
I'm not
and then
familiar with
once a
some of
year,
these ones. Are they comparable to the jump lines at Whistler or are they big jumps? What are they like?
yeah, I haven't since I haven't seen the ones in person in Bellingham, but I've seen them in videos and heard a
Yeah,
lot of
awesome.
good things. And I know like Hannah Bergman's hang time was there last year, which would be amazing to be a part of. I would absolutely love to make it into like Dark Horse if I could.
Yeah,
Casey
rad.
Brown's event. I was working really hard to get into formation this year, and they announced it ladies recently, so I'm excited to watch that
Awesome.
happen. I mean, once a year we always make it down to the desert, so I'll be really excited to pop down there and just explore more stuff around here that I haven't got to do yet.
Oh, that's awesome. Sounds like a jam-packed summer full of riding. Love
Yeah.
it. I've got a couple of questions here from our followers on Instagram. Rob has asked probably the most difficult question I'm going to ask you for this whole podcast. What's your favorite trail in the Sea to Sky corridor?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. There's so many of them. Um, I
Maybe you can give us like a
do,
top three or something like that. Top three that you love in
yeah,
this week.
loving this week. I guess like I've always loved Somewhere Over There when like Three
Mm,
Unrelated Dead Guys. It's always the good classic one on my list.
yeah, really underrated trails,
Um,
I think, because they are
yeah,
kind of way over there. But
yeah, it's
awesome
like
ride.
out of sight, out of mind, and you're like,
Mm,
oh, we should ride somewhere over there. And you're like, oh yeah, we should. It's actually really fun. And then every time you
always a
ride it,
good
you're like,
time, man.
so much fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good. The whole slab zone to
Yeah.
in Alice Lake, like that, we didn't have stuff like that back home when I was just like, it's so different, I guess. Like
Mm,
it's different from doing that high speed jumps and like flowy stuff. It's actually like flip of a switch. You can actually creep down that stuff. It's not
yeah.
necessarily about like sending it. It's um, learning a different type of like brake control and bike control, and some of them can get really tricky and challenging yourself and stuff. So I do love all of that. And then I do like riding Seymour quite a bit, the dark side stuff over there. It's always
Oh yeah.
fun. And they just redid recently the Boogie Nights Trail, which was such a beautiful build, and so unique. I love that.
Yeah, some amazing trail work there, hey?
Yeah, yeah. And as far as Whistler, I actually haven't ridden that much out of the bike park, which is on my list for the summer to actually do some Whistler trail riding. Like Lord of the Squirrels, Dark Crystal, trails like that are on my list. I've always heard really good things about. Yeah,
Ah,
hopefully that answers their question.
super cool. And I love your answer there, because I'd probably answer that question similarly. It's like there's no one favorite trail. There's just so many good ones.
Yeah, there's
So
so
here's a
many.
handful. Yeah. No, I love it. Jackson has asked us, or asked you, what's your motivation to be always pushing outside of your comfort zone?
um, I don't know. I guess because biking really helped me overcome big challenges, and working up to that next thing is just keeping me on my toes. It's keeping me alert. It's yeah, that's hard. It's like hard to answer, but
No, that's a great answer already.
once like yeah, once you see something and you're like, I want that. It's always giving me something to
Hmm.
work towards. And then once you accomplish it, you're like over the moon. And then of course shortly after you're like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, so true.
um, so I think it's just keeps me motivated because it just keeps me going. Um,
Yeah.
and always just wanting to push myself and surprise myself, I guess, on what I'm actually capable of doing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Really good answer. Look, I'm going to be respectful of your time and kind of start wrapping things up here, but I've got
Okay.
to get just a couple more questions. And going deep here for these last couple, I'd love to know, like, what would you say to your 20-year-old self?
You have no idea. No. um, just keep doing what you're doing, I guess, and never give up.
Hmm.
Never
Yeah,
give up.
great
Yeah.
advice. Yeah. Yeah, you have no idea what's coming. I love that. And then looking ahead here, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
That's also hard to answer because,
Yeah.
like I said, if I put myself in my shoes 10 years ago, would I say I'd be here right now? Um, I don't know. Hopefully, still on the positive growing uh, path and creating, I don't know, just new adventures and new experiences and traveling. Hopefully, I've traveled a lot of the world by then with my bike. And yeah, I guess that's a hard one to answer.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Sounds like lots more good times to come. Well, it's been such a broad and insightful conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed your answers and kind of digging into some of the stuff you've been up to a little deeper. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the biggest takeaway that you hope listeners of this podcast can take away from this conversation?
Um, I guess that like yes, fear exists and it's real, and to respect it, but not to let it control you and
Hmm.
hold you back from the things that you want to do or that you're capable of doing.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. Yeah, let's leave it on that final thought. Where can people find you and follow along with your adventures online?
I mainly just use Instagram. Yeah, with I guess my handle would be Nicole.a.kennedy. So Nicole.a.kennedy.
Fantastic. And I can put a link to that one in the show notes as well. Is there also like a dedicated page to Johann's progression team?
um, I know we all have our handles, but we've been adding stuff on the hashtag I okay, hang on. Into the Gnar progression team. ITGPT.
Okay, fantastic.
I think hashtag ITGP. It's like it's an abbreviation of the whole
Yeah. That's
thing.
funny
Yeah.
because, yeah, when I was promoting this podcast, I couldn't find it. That's probably why.
Yeah.
I'll be able to find
Yeah.
it now, and I will put that in the show notes for anyone that wants to follow
Yeah.
along. I feel there's lots of big things to come, lots of excitement, and lots of stuff that
Yeah.
we can all learn out of this awesome team. So Nicole, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thanks for
Yeah, thank you.
sharing your thoughts, for answering my questions, and for digging deep there. I love your whole perspective on mountain biking, and I'm so excited to see where that takes you in the coming years.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, you get out there and get on the bike. I hope to see you on the trails.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
What's up, guys? Just one more thing before you hit the trails. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any topics or particular episodes that you enjoyed, and even about any mountain bikers that you'd love to hear me have on the show in the future. You can find me on Instagram at the_mind_mountain. This podcast, mountain biking, and mindset are all things that are very, very close to my heart. So I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. Thank you all for listening. That's all for now. Big love to you all, and I'll see you next time.